Hello everyone, I hope you're well. As you may know, last year I made a video about Ian Curtis and mental health. I probably have that video to thank for most of my subscribers. I posted that video on the anniversary of Ian Curtis's death, and I thought that this year, on that same date, I might share my thoughts on his biography. The full title is Touching from a Distance, Ian Curtis and Joy Division, and it's written by Deborah Curtis, Ian Curtis's widow. In case you don't know, Touching from a Distance is a lyric from the Joy Division song Transmission. This book was also the main source material for the Ian Curtis biopic Control.
He is quite famous now, though, isn't he?
Not to me. I still wash his underpants.
The memoir itself isn't that long, it's about 139 pages. There are these inserts of photos from throughout Ian Curtis's life. My favorite feature of the book is the full collection in the back of Ian Curtis's lyrics. Lyrics from the entirety of Joy Division's repertoire, and also some lyrics that never made it to song. I had many thoughts while reading this book. I mean, this book is written by Debbie Curtis herself, and I wondered about how objective and comprehensive her book would be. And I really have to give it to her. She clearly did her research and interviewed lots of people close to Ian Curtis, like close friends and bandmates. She also has a great sense of what was going on in the Manchester music scene at the time and how Joy Division contributed to it. She discusses Ian's early life in really caring detail. He was this obviously smart and non-conformist kid who loved performing and getting attention. Early on, Ian also had this morbid fascination with idols who died young, like James Dean and Janis Joplin. And Debbie Curtis seems to speculate that this fascination contributed to his suicide. Although at the time she and other people probably thought it would go away eventually. He was a real provocateur, hence the name Joy Division. She gives a brief analysis of his fascination with Nazi Germany, which she attributes more to his sense of aesthetic rather than to his ideology. Obviously, she talks in depth about their relationship. I found this very illuminating. I knew their marriage went downhill as Joy Division rose to fame, but I read about the things he did at the beginning of their relationship and I was like, was this guy like Edward Cullen or something? Even when they were first dating, he was so controlling. He policed what Debbie could wear, where she could go, what friends she could have, whether she interacted with males from school or work. He gaslighted her throughout their relationship. He pressured her into dropping out of school when they were both super young, like 17 or 18. As a warning, he told me that I had no choice but to marry him since no one would want what was irretrievably his. She does give us the high points of their relationship, but she doesn't use them to downplay the frankly problematic nature of their relationship. And it really didn't help that the music industry was and still is really sexist. At one point, she and the wives and spouses of the other bandmates were just barred from most Joy Division shows because that interfered with their rock and roll image, which is just an injustice, especially since these wives and girlfriends were the ones helping pad their audiences during their early gigs, guarding their equipment at shows so it wasn't stolen, helping put together the sleeves for their early EPs. I found myself actually really disliking Ian at certain points for ways he'd mistreated and humiliated his wife, but then I also found myself being impressed by his tenderness towards his wife and his kid. And that's the thing, everyone who knew Ian Curtis said he was full of contradictions, and reading this book made me really realize that. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the mental and physical health aspect of this book. What really stood out to me was how so many people misinterpreted what Ian needed. I mean, he refused to get help, but those around him just didn't know how to help, or just straight up didn't help. He went straight from his first suicide attempt to playing more gigs because the band and their manager were so intent on their success. People like Tony Wilson, who ran the band's label and actually brought the band into the spotlight in the first place. He seemed to think all of Ian's problems would just go away eventually. And meanwhile, the band's audience came to see Ian's epileptic fits during gigs as just part of the show, in effect glorifying his disorder when in fact he was really suffering. A lot of factors probably contributed to his suicide, but the prevailing attitudes towards mental health at the time certainly didn't help. I have a few pieces of critique for this book. I really would have liked more dialogue to illustrate Ian and Deborah Curtis's relationship, because dialogue, even if you don't really remember it to the T, it really brings a relationship to life, whether it's in fiction or nonfiction. Because sometimes Debbie would talk about how Ian wouldn't let certain friends of hers attend their wedding, and I wanted to know how the conversation around that went. And sometimes she talked about certain events and didn't give them context. There's this incident she talks about. Later that night, I had my first taste of things to come when one of our neighbors took off her clothes and engaged Ian in a snogging session. Not that Ian objected. And I was like, wait, How did that happen? Nonetheless, I'm glad this book exists, if only to demystify Ian Curtis's persona. He's such a myth in the world of music, and it's really important to remember that he was still a human being. I read some reviews of this book on Goodreads, and some people accused Debbie Curtis of trying to assassinate Ian's character and being overly bitter. I was surprised she wasn't more bitter, because she suffered so much as a result of this marriage. And as someone with experience with controlling and abusive relationships, I was like, well, of course she wants to talk about the bad parts of her relationship. I would. Who wouldn't want to get that stuff out of their system? I'm totally on board with her having a platform to just share her truth. There's no way I can share all my thoughts about this book in one video. In any case, I recommend this to any Joy Division fan who's interested in a close exploration of Ian Curtis's life. You don't have to dislike him after reading this. He was a genius, no doubt about it. I will listen to Joy Division until the end of time. Certainly this may help balance Ian Curtis the music legend with Ian Curtis the man. If you want to watch my previous video about Ian Curtis, I will link it below. I also have a playlist on my channel with all my favorite Joy Division songs. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I will see you later.